Hello, my name is Geoff Hunt, and today I'm going to talk to you about condensation mould. Kill it, cure it, get rid of it. Sounds easy, doesn't it? But I bet the reason you're watching this video is because you've watched lots of videos about how to kill it and cure it and get rid of it. And you've tried all of that and it's not working. You may be a tenant that has called your landlord hundreds of times and you've tried everything you can to try to get it resolved. And you may well be a landlord that has done as much as you can to put it all straight and to help your tenant resolve this dreadful, dreadful factor in housing. And I suggest that maybe there are some reasons for that. I'm going to go over those with you today. There's some very simple rules and some great tips and tricks to help you both try to get this all in balance. But first, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I've been a chartered building surveyor for 35 years now, and I have investigated hundreds of severe cases of condensation and black mould. And you know what? I'd struggle. I would struggle trying to control condensation mould if I had very little money on heating, lots of people in the house, lots of things to manage, and particularly in the winter. So here's the big take home that I want you to have, that it's actually not your fault. It's not easy controlling condensation mould. We actually can't cure mould. We can't just kill it, and we can't just stop it with fans and double glazing and insulation, as hard as we may try. It will just come back if the conditions are not right. So you may have discovered this by looking at other videos, and this is probably why you're here now. So why is it happening? Well, the thing is, it's actually literally everywhere. If you look around the room you're sat in right now, there's enough water floating around in the air to cause as much trouble as possible. And if you were to look out the window, you might see clouds floating in the sky, and they are there for exactly the same principles as why you are having problems in, say, your kitchen or your bathroom or everywhere. So as you can see, it's very difficult to try to control things that are literally all around you. And it's very difficult to try and cope with that. It's a bit like digging a hole in a lake. And so it isn't easy. And you may have tried, and your landlord may have tried, but you need to understand the basic principles of what is happening in order to try to come to some arrangement of how it can be managed better. Otherwise, you will not see any improvement at all. So what you need to do is look around your house and look at the exact spot where there is condensation mould, because this is telling you exactly where the problem is. Now, what we say is that where there is mould, it is cold. But what you have to do is at each place where you find the mould, you have to look at the balance between two key factors. The first one is how much energy there is in the air. So here's my energy, and this can be high heat or low heat. And then you need to balance that with the amount of moisture you've actually got in the air. You can squeeze it out like that. So these are the two things that are constantly in balance with each other. The energy in the air, or the heat in the air, and how much water there is in the air itself. So you can have a lot of heat but a lot of moisture, or not much heat and a lot of moisture, or not a lot of both, or too much moisture than you have heat. So you can see that this is going around all the time around your house. Just like we get different weather patterns around the country, we get different amounts of heat and moisture content in each room. So you have to look at each room separately. And don't forget, every household is different. Your household is different from your neighbours, or maybe from people who live in different types of houses. It's the same principle. You need to look at two things at the place where the mould is growing. How much energy is in the air, in heat, and how much of the air has got moisture in it. And once you've worked those two things out, then you can make a plan. So let's take a look at this plan. So the first part of the balancing act is to try to control how much moisture there is actually floating around in the air itself. Now, one thing to remember here is that there is plenty of space in the air itself for more than enough water. So we deal with how much water is in the air two basic ways. Now, the way it's done in a commercial air conditioning system is we use a dehumidifier, which basically squeezes the air out. Now, that's a very, very effective way of doing things, and dehumidifiers can have a very good effect on taking out moisture straight from the air. Of course, they do still cost some money to run, but this can actually help take moisture out of the air to help that balancing act if it's needed. Now, the other way to do it is to take the air, and let's imagine this sponge is our air with some water in it, and we just sort of move it out of the room, and that should leave us with drier air behind. And this is what ventilation is. So we can take this moisture and hopefully open a window, and then it will go out the window. Now, the point of that is that what do you pull in behind it? So you must make sure that there is dry air coming in behind it. And what you must not be doing is losing any heat, because that's the other part of the balancing act. So we don't want to open our windows too long in the winter time, and we need to make sure that if we are moving the air by either using a fan or opening a window, that we've got drier air coming in behind. So this is the form of the ventilation trick, if you like. It isn't so much reducing the amount of moisture in the air, it's simply taking the air that's got a lot in it, moving it out and allowing drier air to come in, and it all mixes around. And so that's how we get our balancing act right. So part of the problem with that is that you can ventilate too much, and the other problem is that you're drawing in air which is already moist itself. So if you do get days which have got very high humidity outside, then that isn't going to have terribly much effect. So it's not a case that in every room you can just simply ventilate. Now, there are some mechanical fans as well which pump dry air in throughout the entire house, and those systems can also work very well. They're quite expensive to install, and again, if the balance is not right between the amount of moisture in the air and the amount of heat or energy in the air, you will get condensation again. So you do have to be very, very careful with what you apply at what time in what room. Let's take a look at the second part of the balancing act, and that is the amount of energy you've got in the air. Now, we may think of this energy as the heat that we put into the air, and we measure that in centigrade. So the kind of heat we need in the air is about 21 degrees C, and that is room temperature. So that's one of the first things to check. Is your room at 21 degrees C? And if it's not, try to get it to that position. So in terms of heat, it's really quite simple. The more heat you put into the house, the more energy you put into the air, and the more energy you put into the air, the more the water molecules move around faster and they stay in the air. They don't turn into water and turn into condensation. So the amount of energy in the air literally relates to how hot you've got your house. So if you've got a thermometer, put it into the bedrooms or the kitchen or the hallway so that you know what the temperature is, and you make sure that your thermostat is set to 21 degrees C in the daytime. Now you can go down to about 18, maybe 17, but really not much lower than that. And obviously as you lower the temperature, so you change the balancing act between the amount of moisture that might be around in the air at the time. Now, when you think of the air, you don't necessarily need to think of the air all around you. You need to think of it exactly where that mold is. So that might be on a window. Now, you need to think about how much energy is at the window. So the window may feel cold. In other words, there's not much energy there. And so at that very, very point where the mold is, there's not enough energy. Your room may be warm enough, but that window is not warm enough. And so either you need to put in more heat into the room to actually heat the window up, or you need to put something in and around the window to make sure that it does not get cold. This is why we start adding insulation to walls to try to keep them warmer, so that that wall is warm enough, so that the wall has energy too. And that's what it's all about. The energy we put into the air also heats up the surfaces, like the windows and the walls and the ceilings. Now, if those windows, walls and ceilings don't hold on to that heat and let it go, then they will stay cold. And if they stay cold, that's when you get the mold. So wherever you see the mold, whether it's a spot on the ceiling or a little bit around the window frame or maybe all over the walls, it is because those surfaces are way, way too cold. And so you need to either heat them up and constantly heat them up, or in some way try to keep them warm once you have heated them up. Now that's not a very simple trick, because obviously you need to put more energy into the air in order to achieve that. So the only reason we insulate things is so that you don't have to put quite as much in, so that they don't cool down. But that doesn't mean to say that they would never cool down and never be out of balance with the amount of moisture that you put in the air. So you can see that even if you did put insulation in, if the balance is not right, then the mold will come back. When things get out of control with mold, you do have to act quickly. It can be extremely dangerous, and so you need to work on it as soon as you possibly can. If you have mold on nearly all the walls in all of the rooms and it does not go away, and you've had this for more than 2 to 3 months, this would be considered to be an emergency now, and you really need to get onto your landlord to get it done immediately. So one of the first things that you need to do in that respect is to get a specialist for around, and that is to clean all the mold down with special mold killers. Now, don't try to do that yourself, because you may upset some of the spores and you can cause problems with health that could already be prevailing. So just be very, very careful. If it's just small amounts, that's fine, but we're talking about large amounts that have been in for a long time. So that is the point one. Get in and get it cleaned down with a proper mold killer. Now, that just deals with it immediately. That doesn't mean to say that you've cured it. And so if you are a landlord, do not think that you've cured mold simply because you've cleaned it off, or simply because you painted something with anti-fungicidal paint. This is not the cure, and it will not stop it coming back. Now then, let's take a look at some top tips that you can do. Make sure you've got your programmer running. Now, the really big tip is here is if you don't have much in the way of heat, and you don't want to spend a lot of money heating the house all the time, then use it wisely. Don't waste the heat, and a programmer helps you do just that. It's very important to make sure the rooms are ready before your family get up. Now, if you've got a programmer, that means you can set the program maybe half an hour before everybody gets up, and therefore there's enough energy in the air before you start producing all that moisture. So the balancing act is already in favour of the house before you even start. If you don't do that, you're going to produce lots and lots of moisture, and there will not be enough energy in the air, and therefore you'll get condensation on the coldest parts of the house, and that's where the mould will grow. So another top tip as well is, if you are going to open a window in the winter time, as I showed with the sponge, then only do that very, very quickly. The water in the air wants to get out very quickly, and so it will. You don't need to give it much time. So a count of 5 seconds is more than enough just to help rebalance the amount of moisture in the air. Okay, make sure you use your fans as well for your bathrooms and your kitchens, and that is also very important. Make sure your landlord checks that they're working correctly, and you must need to make sure that they're on. So they can be noisy, sometimes people switch them off, but don't have them off all the time. The next one is drying clothes, and this is a tricky one, because if you are in a very small flat and you've got a big family, this is very, very difficult. Maybe you live in multi-occupancy flats or bedsits, and it's just pandemonium with clothes all over the radiators. So what you need to try and do there is to dehumidify the air. In other words, take the moisture that your clothes are putting into the air and pull it out of the air with a dehumidifier. Now, don't have these running all the time. Put the clothing into a smaller room, run in with the dehumidifier running, and that should really help contain the balance between the amount of energy in the air and the amount of water you've got in the air. So the dehumidifier pulls the balance back down, because you can't really heat it up all that much. And if the amount of water in the air is going to be so great, opening up a window and doing things like that is really perhaps not going to help. So you need a bit of mechanical help there. If you have to put it in a room with no dehumidifier, put it in a small room which has got some kind of mechanical ventilation and allows warm, dry air in under the door maybe, or through like a small little trickle vent in the window. That is fine. Do not leave the window wide open. There's a security issue with that. And also you don't want to lose heat. Okay, so remember that 5-second rule with the windows. Now, the other important thing, lastly, is to make sure the doors are closed, especially if you've got lots of people going into the bathroom, say one after the other in the morning time. So when that happens, you need to make sure that there is a lot of energy in the bathroom. So make sure the radiator is on in there just for the time that's needed or ahead of time. Make sure everybody opens and closes the windows just for 5 seconds before and after they shower, and make sure that the fan is working all the time that everybody is in the shower. Now, when everybody comes out, they need to bring their towels with them, and they need to then close the door and make sure that door stays closed. Okay, so that is a very, very important tip. So I do hope those points have been very, very useful to you. Don't forget, it is very difficult to control condensation mold in your home. It's not you, it's not your fault. And landlords, keep trying, keep talking to your tenants, pull them to you and see if you can get to a point where this is in balance for them. Every household is different, every type of house is different. So there is no magic bullet, there is no magic cure. We cannot kill it, we cannot get rid of it, we have to manage it.